turn on here in just a second, Bob. Glad Jean was able to be here tonight. I'm feeling real well. She's been really struggling. Headaches, other issues. She's been, some of y'all may have noticed me Sunday a little bit. I have a sty in my right eye.
Oh, Jody struggles with those.
Yeah.
Gold ring.
They stink.
Have you ever done that? A gold ring?
No, hadn't heard that one.
Every time I've had one, it's worked. A gold ring. Just rub it on it.
Really?
Worked for me.
Yeah, when Stan had to buy some gold.
He's probably got a wedding ring.
Oh, tell her. This, it just, my finger's got a little bit. This is my wedding ring. Actually, it's not. But it looks just like it. Because when I was still quite a young man, when they set the back of the back patch, my wedding ring disappeared. So who knows where in the world that thing is.
I know.
So we talked about it at our house in front of my daddy. My daddy said, wait just a few minutes, and he goes and he had traded for another old car, and he found this ring in that car, and it looks just exactly like my wedding ring.
Oh,
So,
maybe they found it in the backpack.
so I've taken good care of it. Here 30 years later, I still have it. Well, that's one of those. That's, if you just, yeah, if you knew Dad and how he traded and all those kinds of things, that would be funny.
Our funny story in our fun, I wore one for 40 years and never took it off. And it looked rough. And so Jody just got on me, and she got me a brand new one.
Yeah.
And I had it a week and it disappeared. And now I don't have one.
Weird how things like that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in Habakkuk again tonight. This is, I guess, just our third lesson maybe, and there won't be but a couple more, if that. Could be one more after tonight. See how we get along. But I kind of entitled this study as Trusting in God Even When We Don't Understand. And I think, at least in the first chapter, we saw where that title or that idea came from, because we see Habakkuk. And he is frustrated with God at the start because God hasn't punished, or he seems to be ignoring the sin that taking place among his people in Judah. And Habakkuk is upset about that. And he doesn't understand why God is not doing something. And then when he finds out what God is going to do, Habakkuk again is upset, right? What's he upset about this time? Yeah, that he said, Lord, a people, you're going to punish them with a people that are worse than they are. And he didn't understand that either. And so God has, in our study, God has told him at the beginning of chapter 2, and Habakkuk is awaiting. Habakkuk has argued with him a little bit, and he even asked the question in the last verse, that's chapter 1, is he then to keep on emptying his net and mercilessly killing nations forever? In other words, God, if you're going to use Babylon to punish your people, are you just going to let this go on forever? Is Babylon just going to go through and take over everybody? Because, they're the worst of the worst, and how can you let them punish your people Judah? And then he says that he's going to wait, and he's going to wait for God's answer and see what the Lord says to him. And beginning in verse 2, God has said to him, write the vision Make it plain on tables, so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. God's answer is, Habakkuk, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. And it's coming. It may not be here right off. You may think you're waiting a long time with it because we are very impatient people, aren't we? We don't think in terms of years when we're waiting on something necessarily, do we, Margaret? No. We want the answer now. We want to see the results now. And that really, really challenges us. But in the Bible, we see the way that God's work and how God's time actually works. And the classic story in this, I think, is God is going to raise up He's chosen Israel to be His people, the descendants of Abraham, and He is going to get them into Egypt and prepare them to be a nation. It's only going to be 435 years later when He brings them out. 435 years! That just blows our mind. Our country is only 250 years old this year. And that was 435 years. So God's time is totally different. But He tells Habakkuk, it's going to happen in its appointed time. Well, who's appointed that time? God has. In the time that I've appointed, it's going to happen. And it will be as I have said. And then we read verse 4. And we're going to spend some time talking about this verse. Todd's going to appreciate this some tonight too. I believe that the first part of verse 4 is directed toward the Babylonians. It only makes sense. This book that I use sometimes agrees with that. I have read a commentary where he thinks that this is made against the Judeans, but I don't think so. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him. God has just said, I'm going to use the Babylonians, and it's going to happen. But God knows who the Babylonians are. And He knows that they are an arrogant people. But then, after He has said, I know that he is puffed up and his soul is not right, He then says these simple words, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Some of you I know probably remember me saying something like this before. I am amazed that half of a verse in the second chapter and the fourth verse of the book of Habakkuk is the very verse that the Apostle Paul will use in Romans chapter 1 and verse 17 to lay out the first 10 or 11 chapters of the book of Romans about what he's going to talk about. Isn't that amazing?
I know, it's just some crazy little line in a weird book
Yeah.
in the Old Testament, and he builds
One of the biggest truths of the entire, of the entire Bible. It's what our relationship with Jesus is based upon. There was an old law which said what? You do this. Thou shalt not, but you have to live this way, and the way that a man is right is by keeping the law. And it is transformed by Jesus into a law which the Apostle Paul makes the case, it's not built upon a law to keep, it's built upon faith. It's built upon faith. And we see in Romans why that's necessary and how that works. And when Todd is always talking about that God found a way to justify us and be just at the same time. That's all because He found a way to use faith to bring us to be right with Him in the work that Jesus had done. And so God contrasts these two things. He's contrasting a wicked nation, and what's His description of them? What kind of people are they in the description? Puffed up or proud or haughty, and He's not right on the inside. He's not right, because when people are driven by selfish feelings, what do they do things for? Who are they doing things for? Themselves. Exactly. And he contrasts that with the latter part of the verse that says, but a righteous person. And we could spend all night long talking about that if we wanted to. But a righteous person is a person who lives by their faith. Now, I think that's also setting up, though, part of the lesson that God, through Habakkuk, is going to teach us in this book. Because when we get into chapter 3, and hopefully our next lesson, Habakkuk is going to begin to tell the mighty, powerful, wonderful things that God has done. And then he's going to end his prayer with basically a statement of faith. And it's like, his faith is like, it doesn't matter how bad it looks or what may come. I'm going to have to stick with the Lord. He's the one I'm going to trust in, because nothing else is going to work. Only God can assure your future. Only God can do what they want to do. And God will do what He wants to do, and you can put your faith in God. Habakkuk says, I'm going to put mine in Him. That's what I'm going to do. And this is where we're just given a little bit of insight into what's coming. And so I don't want to get into this discussion right now in our lesson. But what did I say we were going to talk? So, trusting in God even when we don't understand. You know where this book is fixing to take us? Literally, I think when we get through, we're going to see that, folks, we either trust in Him and believe in Him and have faith in Him, or we don't. And if you don't have faith in God, then where is your faith? If you don't really believe that God can make all things right and does all things right, then where are you going to go? Right? It's either, what did we say that Babylonian was? That haughty man. And we're going to see in these following verses. You know why he goes into other nations and takes them over and kills who he wants to and takes what he wants to? Because he wants to. He does what he wants to. But God says there's another way to live. You don't do what you want to. You try to do what God wants you to. Because you believe in Him. And that's Habakkuk, I think, Habakkuk's going through this process right now. He's upset with God. He's angry with God. God, I don't understand. I'm going to wait and see what He says. Well, He's told me it's a-coming, but He tells me that this Babylonian is a bad guy, and He's fixing to tell him what He's going to do to Babylonia. Yeah. But He also tells Habakkuk, but the righteous man's going to do what? He's going to live. Why? Because of his faith. Because of his faith. Let's look at these, at what he begins. And I'm going to use this source that I have. It's an excellent book. It's got a kind of an outline and comments on every book in the Bible. But I think this fella can say it better. But let's look beginning in verse 6. Okay, my Bible, I don't know if yours has headings in it. These are not biblical headings, obviously. This wasn't a part of the original text. But the translators in the ESV, starting with verse 6, head these verses up as saying, this is a woe to the Chaldeans. That's the Babylonians. What does he say? Shall not all these take up their taunt against him with scoffing and riddles for him and say, this is what the people of the world are going to eventually say to the Chaldeans, or that God is maybe as well. Woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. For how long? And loads himself with pledges. Will not your debtors suddenly arise, and those awake who will make you tremble? Then you will be spoiled for them, because you have plundered many nations. All the remnant of the peoples shall plunder you, for the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. Here's what this man has to say about that, and I think he's exactly right. God in this chapter is going to strike his gavel 5 times, he says. These are oracles, and this is God telling Babylon that you're going to get exactly what you did to everybody else. And so the first thing is the plunderer, okay, that's Babylonia, is going to get plundered. That's what those verses basically say. Verse 8, because you have plundered many nations, all the remnant of the people shall plunder you. Todd, what do we know happened to the Babylonians? The Greeks. The Medes and the Persians, rather. Yes. And that was in our... If you were in Sunday school class this past Sunday, and Darius or Darius was the Persian king, well, that's after Habakkuk. Because the Persians are in control, as we read in our study Sunday morning. But you know what they did? How they got in control? They plundered the Babylonians. They wiped them out.
It happened just suddenly.
Okay.
This very, writing on the wall.
So what does that say to Habakkuk? What is Habakkuk's main complaint?
God's, these are terrible people.
These are terrible people, Lord. What do you mean you're going to use them to punish Judah? What's the first point that God has made in his answer now to Habakkuk? Don't you worry about the Babylonians. They are going to get what's coming to them. I can use them to punish Judah if I want to, but don't you think that their sin won't go unpunished? Because they are going to get overthrown as well. And they will be plundered. They will have done to them exactly what they did to other people. What do we say sometimes? Sometimes, isn't it kind of a thing of justice? Sometimes we say, it was only right that they got what they got because that's exactly what they had done to somebody else. That's right. That's right. And God saw that as being just in punishing the Babylonians. He's not using them because they're doing what he wants them to and he's going to let them punish Judah. He's punishing Judah because Judah has been sinful. He's not using Babylonia because they're good. He's just using them to bring the punishment. But God knows that the Babylonians are a more sinful people, and he's going to punish them. Let's look at the next one. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples. You have forfeited your life, for the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork respond. He says, the builder's building becomes fuel for the fire. The idea is that Babylonia is going and taking everybody else's house and everybody else's gold and silver and precious things, and they're making themselves their fine houses. But God says, all those articles in your house that you stole from somebody else, that you killed somebody else in order to get them, they're going to cry out against you. And you're going to lose it. It's going to be taken away from you. Woe to him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Behold, is it not from the Lord of hosts that peoples labor merely for fire and nations weary themselves for nothing? They built towns with blood, meaning what?
They're just going to burn blood too.
Yeah. They go in and they murder people. And if they don't murder them all, what do they make out of them? Slaves. And they help to build the city so that the Babylonians can live in it. This is our city now. But notice verse 13. It's a rhetorical question. Meaning that the answer is obviously yes. Is it not from the Lord of hosts that peoples labor merely for fire and nations weary themselves for nothing? In our Sunday school class this past Sunday, do you remember what that was? Zechariah, is that right? That was Zechariah, wasn't it? Or Zephaniah. It was Zechariah, I think, this past Sunday. Do you remember what God told those people He had done to them? What was it? They worked real hard and they harvested, but they didn't have enough to eat. Do you remember that? And He was talking about, and what was going on? God wasn't blessing their labors. You know, it's like they were working so hard, trying to get ahead, trying to get a bunch of stuff, and God was turning it into just barely enough to get by. That's kind of what these verses say. Only it's even worse here. The nations weary themselves for nothing. Babylon is going to go to battle. They're going to go to war. They think they're going to become the conquerors and owners of the entire world. And you know what God's going to turn it into? Demolishing the Babylonians. They're not going to be anything. And then there's verse 14 right in there, and I bet you've heard this one. God is at work, and what is the result of that? If people are paying attention, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. I think the world is full of people that don't believe that there is a God, and they never even consider the fact that there is a higher power at work in this world that knows everything that's going on. There's probably more of those people. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's more of those people in the world than those of us who believe that there is a God in heaven and who can do whatever He wants to whenever He wants to. But this verse says, and maybe it hasn't come yet, But there will be a day when the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. What does the Bible say every knee and every tongue is going to do when Jesus comes back? Bow and confess. And obviously, in some places and in some ways, this verse comes true from time to time. There are places and there are peoples who believe in the Almighty God of heaven, and they believe that He's in control. And when they talk about worldly events, when I read my Old Testament, we talked about this just the other day a little bit. I think, Todd, you might have been on that. On that. Why didn't Assyria conquer Judah? Judah's this little bitty place, and Assyria is the great kingdom of the world, empire of the world, before the Babylonians come along. Why didn't the Assyrians conquer Jerusalem? They came right to the city on more than one occasion. You know why they didn't conquer Jerusalem?
Because God didn't let them.
Exactly, Margaret. In fact, that's one of those stories where the Bible just says something to the effect, and I may have the number wrong, but the next morning there were 220,000 dead men. It just happened. The Lord killed them overnight. Nobody fought them. They were just dead the next morning. And so you know what the leader of the army did? He tucked his tail and he got out of there. And they didn't come back. They tried a couple times. The Assyrians did. They never did take Judah. Why? Because God determined that they wouldn't. And if God determined they wouldn't, then they wouldn't. So what if they're the great empire of the world? If God says no, then it's no. Woe to him who makes his neighbors drink and pour out your wrath and make them drunk in order to gaze at their nakedness. I think that's symbolic language. That's forcing people to do things that embarrasses them and allows you to make fun of them, to laugh at them, to look down upon them. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourself and show your uncircumcision. Uncircumcision represents what at that time? Who were the circumcised?
They're unclean. They're filthy.
Right. God's people. They're not God's people.
They're not God's people.
That's right. The cup is in the Lord's right hand. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. The violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, as will the destruction of the beast that terrified them. For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. What does he say? The one who forces the other to get drunk will drink shame from the cup of God's wrath. And then, what profit is an idol? And God does this from time to time. When its maker has shaped it, a metal image, a teacher of lies, for its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, to a silent stone, arise. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there's no breath in it at all. It's a stick. It's a piece of metal. Man made it with his own hands, and then somehow that thing is supposed to be the power of his life. It's the great God that he worships because he delivers them or gives him victory. And God says, I am the great God of heaven. I was before anything else was. and you are making a piece of wood or a piece of metal that is not supposed to be able to do what I can do. And then a verse I know you've all heard. But the Lord is in His holy temple. Where's the idol?
Not in the temple.
The idol itself is in the imagination of man because it can't even think. It's a piece of wood. Right? Yeah. It can't even think. It's not alive. The Lord, though, is in His holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before Him. Yeah. The very idea that man would make something with his own hands, whittle on it, cover it up with metal, fall down and worship it, and think that it can actually do things for Him. And God says, it can't talk, it can't move, it can't think, it can't do anything. But God, He's in His holy temple.
You
The
know,
whole
that's
earth.
something common that we see throughout the Bible. This very thing talked about, that men of God point out how ridiculous it is. But yet, Stan, where does that come from?
I don't know.
Why in the world is in us that we would go out and worship something?
Well, you know, Todd, I wonder if the worshiping thing perhaps is something that maybe God put within us. Our need to worship, but obviously,
But isn't it amazing how perverted, what is it about us humans that want to do something so crazy?
I know. Well, I do want to make this point, Todd, and maybe this isn't the point in one of the points in the chapter, but I kind of think it is. When God first condemns the Chaldeans in that verse 4, what does He say? You're puffed up.
Yeah.
And you're not right on the inside. I contend, and I believe this to be true, if I don't believe that there is a God, then who do I believe is in control? I mean, to me, there's only one other choice. It's me.
Well, you know,
Ruthie, I decide what's right.
and Stan, we see that huge, you know, that's the source of sin, you know, the pride of our eyes,
Yeah.
the pride of the flesh, of our desires, of the lust.
Yes.
That's the source.
Right.
And it says it develops and it grows and sin springs forth.
Right.
And it's, I don't know, we're little, you know, and I don't know, maybe this whole worship thing of idols, if we don't have God, there must be a vacuum, and we seem like we feel it real quick with ourselves.
Right.
And they must create these little deities that work for them. You know what I mean?
That's what.
It fits their personal.
There you go. I think that's it,
There's
Todd.
something going on there.
Oh, they obviously actually worship these deities that they have created for themselves. But what do they get to do? They get to decide how that dignity acts, how that dignity feels. Right? Huh? Yeah, they get to make up the rules that they claim the God does.
And that God seems to be okay with them doing things they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, their God delivered the Judea into their hands, they think. They would say. But we know who really did deliver the Judea. God, the real God of heaven did. But He's also gonna deliver them to to the Medes and the Persians too. Yeah. But what I'm saying, Todd, is where does that come from? I think, to me, it really comes down to this it being almost this simple, although I'm sure a lot of people in the world would not admit it. But either He is God or I am. Yeah. Because if you deny Him, then what are your other choices? Well, I'm going to make Him like I want Him to be, which means I'm really the one. I'm really the God, because I can make the God be like I want Him to be. I'll make Him look like I want Him to look. And He'll want me to do what I want to do, Andrew.
You know, that's a lot with the challenges of Jesus. You know, we're asked to die to ourselves.
Yes.
We're asked to die to ourselves. And,
Good point, Todd.
and be raised a new creature and to walk in this new life, obedience and following Him.
Right. Well, we're about ready to stop. We're not going to get into chapter 3, but I want us to realize what's happened and see, hopefully, what's happened in chapter 2. Habakkuk's upset. He does not understand God. It makes no sense to him. Why, Lord? How could you? God says, it's going to happen. It's going to happen on my time. Wait for it, but it is coming. And then he begins to talk about those Chaldeans, those Babylonians. And by the time he gets through with chapter 2 in our Bibles, what has he said to Habakkuk? Habakkuk, I know that they are an evil, sinful people. And I am going to take care of them. You can be sure. But those people and their gods are nothing before me. It is, let me read those 2 verses. The earth will be filled with what? The great power or knowledge of the gods that man has created? No, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And all of these other gods that are so-called gods that are claimed by people, the answer God gives to that in verse 20 is, no, but the real living God is the Lord, and He lives in His holy temple. And all the earth should keep silence before Him, because they have no right to claim anything.
That's powerful. That verse is a powerful verse.
Yes, it is.